Hello everyone, Storm1 here. Today we'll be tracking a storm system that's going to bring significant impacts across parts of the Central in the eastern part of the country. It's going to have a major Arctic outbreak. There's a potential for a blizzard, strong winds, a decent amount of rain, and also coastal flooding issues along parts of the East Coast. Before we get started in this video, if you guys like weather-related content, you can subscribe to my channel. We do this stuff here all the time on this channel. Plus, we could have another update or two later this week, depending on if I have time for it or not. So stay tuned for any more updates if I can post uh, any more as well. So we're going to get started with the GFS model. We're actually going to start off with the precept type map, and then we're going to get a little bit more detail and talk about the threats. I also made a little bit scenario map, which I will show at the end of the video. So starting off with the crazy GFS, which the GFS has had some of its crazier runs in the past couple of days. But let's check out the latest run. So the 18Z. So as we get into Wednesday, here comes our storm system moving further northwest. It doesn't look that bad, at least for a precept type map. It's bringing in a decent amount of snow across parts of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, eventually getting into parts of the northern plains. And then this is where things get very interesting. By Thursday morning, we should start to see a surface low begin to show up somewhere in the southern plains area. And behind this Arctic front is very cold temperatures, and that's actually an understatement. Very cold temperatures. But also, check out that high pressure system in western Montana. GFS is showing a pressure of 1,067 millibars. That is a pretty strong high pressure system. If I'm correct, I think that would break records in the Montana. It's the strongest high pressure system ever recorded, if that were to verify. And you can see here going through today on Thursday here, our Arctic front is going to continue to push to the south here. And this Arctic front is just going to make it all the way down into the Gulf of Mexico, which we'll have an easier way to look at that here in a few moments. But as we get into Thursday evening, this is where our storm really begins to amplify here. Got 1,008 millibar low in the northwestern part of Arkansas. It's got heavy snow on the backside of it over parts of the Ozarks, even quite a bit of snow across a decent chunk of the Midwest. We also got another little piece of energy just to the east there across the mid-Atlantic, which could bring in a little cold air damming event across parts of West Virginia, but even into parts of Pennsylvania. And those are some of the same areas that experienced a pretty significant ice storm not too long ago. And then as we get into Thursday night here, okay, got a 997 bar low over Paducah, Kentucky. And if we go into Friday morning, about 6 hours later, got a 983 millibar low in southwestern Indiana, quickly approaching Indianapolis. But also, check out this Arctic front boundary that sets up here. I mean, just not too far away behind the Arctic boundary, its temperatures are well below freezing, and it will be snowing, more than likely. And by the way, the GFS suggests snowflakes could go as far south as northern Louisiana. Some of the same areas that just experienced a significant tornado outbreak just a few days ago. Isn't that something? And as we move on to 18Z on Friday, it's got the system here bombing out over Indianapolis. Now, I will say that the GFS is probably too amped on this run here, and that does support by climatology as well. So I don't think, which really, to be honest with you, none of these models here is not going to verify 100%, but this kind of gives you an idea of what it could potentially look like. But personally, in my opinion here, I don't think it's going to look exactly like what the GFS is suggesting. But if the GFS were to verify here, you get a significant blizzard over Illinois, Indiana, back into parts of Wisconsin, Michigan, maybe even potentially as far south as Kentucky. And then you get potentially a new surface low that develops along that Arctic front. So you get your upper level low over the Ohio Valley, and then you get a surface low that develops along that Arctic front over parts of the interior northeast. And you can see there by Saturday morning, it's got a 961 millibar low over parts of southeastern Ontario, which is also bringing powerful winds on the backside of that system. Widespread wind gusts 40 to 50 miles per hour will be likely, along with a pretty significant lake effect snow type of event. Which, by the way, this system here, whenever it gets over to the Great Lakes, there's going to be a lot of lake effect snow enhancement from Lake Huron in Lake Michigan. So that's definitely another thing to note. And eventually by Christmas morning, that system should be out of here. And really, for a good chunk of the eastern U.S., we'll be experiencing well below average temperatures. It'll be very cold. It's even got some snow flurries and lake effect snow going on across parts of the Great Lakes and the Northeast as well. So that's one model run. That's the GFS. How about the European model? It's basically pretty similar for Tuesday, Wednesday, and then okay, by Thursday, by 18Z, if we were to go back to the same time frame and kind of compare these two models, you'll notice here that the European model is a little bit faster with this low here, was typically with a more progressive low here, and that kind of makes it have more of a northwest track with the system. So from the European model, you got a 1006 millibar low, kind of along the Missouri and Arkansas border. If you were to compare that to the GFS, our low is still back into eastern Oklahoma. This is kind of unusual because GFS is usually the one that has the progression issues. It's pretty interesting how the GFS is actually slower than the European model. It's actually a little bit interesting. We also got this other system, once again, over parts of the eastern U.S., the Carolines up into the mid-Atlantic, which can still bring that cold air damming event just east of the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia and up into Pennsylvania. And you can see here, if we were to move on to 6Z or 3Z on Friday, you can see here you got a 994 millibar low in the northwestern part of Indiana. If this were to verify, you'll likely experience blizzard-like conditions in the northeast side of Illinois, even back into parts of western Indiana. Of course, we got our Arctic frontier moving across Kentucky and Tennessee with snow not too far behind that Arctic front. Those temperatures will be dropping pretty rapidly behind that front. And if we were to compare the GFS and the European model to 6Z on Friday, there's quite a difference here between these two models. The European model's got the low already going on in northern Indiana. Meanwhile, the GFS is still back towards southwestern Kentucky. So there's already some disagreement between the GFS and the European model. For it to continue to 18Z on Friday, you can see here this thing is a beast when it gets over to Michigan. 972 millibar low. That is a pretty powerful low, my friends. And on the south side of that low, you got heavy snow coming off of Lake Michigan across northern Indiana and southwestern Michigan. If I were to verify, you'll see some pretty significant snowfall totals. And also, blizzard conditions will be very likely within that as well. You also kind of notice how that system kind of slowly weakens. It kind of turns into more of an upper level low. But also, check out the isobars back behind the system here, leading to very windy conditions across the entire Midwest and down into the Ohio Valley. Even in the warm sector of the system here in the Northeast, you got all this moisture coming from the Atlantic, which can lead to some flooding issues. And also, there's a potential for coastal flooding, as well as those winds that kind of come out from the south. And if we were to compare these two models again, you can kind of see here there's big differences here. You got pretty much the main low in northern Michigan. Meanwhile, going back to the GFS, it's got surface low in the southwestern part of New York, with the upper level low being further to the southwest, looking to be over Cincinnati by that point. So yeah, pretty decent differences here between the models. All right, let's go ahead and check out the Canadian model. Basically, pretty much the same thing over the next few days. And then if we go into 18Z on Thursday, okay, it's got a surface low. Now it says the surface low is back here, but if you kind of follow the isobars, it's actually more back towards northwestern Arkansas. It might correct itself on the next slide, or maybe it won't. But anyway, you still got a very similar scenario. Got that Arctic front, got quite a bit of snow back behind that Arctic front. If we were to compare to the GFS model back to 18Z on Thursday, you can see once again the Canadian model is faster than the, or I should say, the Canadian model is faster than the GFS. That's what I was trying to say there. If we were to go back to the European model, actually in reality, the Canadian model is a little bit faster for that system, but it's also a little bit weaker. It takes a little bit more time for the system here to really deepen. This is by the middle of the night, by Thursday night. Got surface low in southwestern Ohio, kind of over the Dayton area. If we kind of look into the GFS model, it takes on a much more northern track, but you notice the difference between the pressure and the low. The European model's got a 988 millibar low. That's in northern Indiana. Meanwhile, the Canadian model is 10 millibars weaker, which keeps the system a little bit more further to the east, plus it's a little bit more progressive. And I think that's partially due to how strong the cold air is, which typically with pretty strong cold air, especially something like this, it keeps the system a little bit more suppressed, which that means that keeps the storm a little bit weaker and it's not as amplified. And that can also lead to a more easterly track. So you also got that potential factor of maybe the system may go along the Appalachian Mountains, which is still possible. And if we were to compare this to the GFS model, so 6Z on Friday, I mean, look, the GFS is much farther to the southwest, over Paducah, Kentucky by that point. So really, as we kind of get into Thursday, that's when we begin to notice some uncertainty. The European model by that point is actually the strongest model, which typically with a stronger system, it has a more northwesterly track here. The GFS is much slower of a system, but it's also a little bit stronger by that point too. It's not nearly as strong as the European model, but still a sub 1000 millibar low. Then the Canadian model is probably the more progressive model, showing 992 millibar low, but it's also, well, it's actually, I was almost getting ready to say the weakest, but it's not the weakest by that point, at least by that point in time. But I will say I think the Canadian model is probably one of the weaker solutions during this time frame here. But also then again, it is more progressive. And check that out when it gets over the Great Lakes, about 18Z on Friday. A 974 millibar low over parts of Lake Superior. And, I mean, the backside low, I mean, that's pretty ridiculous. Heavy snowfall, very strong northwesterly winds. And also check out the warm sector of the system here. Multiple rounds of moderate to maybe at times heavy rain across most of the northeast that could lead to flooding issues, especially again the fact where there is some snowpack out there which could lead to quite a bit of melting. We also got those strong southerly winds that could lead to coastal flooding issues out there. So, yeah. But what all three of these models here do have in common, they all show a significant storm system. The only differences about them is the track of the low and also kind of the intensity and the timing of it as well. So there's still some uncertainty with it at this point in range, which is not surprising. Let's get a little bit more in depth with it. Let's talk about energy, vorticity, 500 millibar winds. So we're going to start off with Wednesday morning. There's two different pieces of energy. Got this main one. This is the piece of energy that's going to bring the big storm. But we also got the second piece of energy farther to the east. Now, this won't be the one that bring the big storm. However, this could potentially change the track of this system. If this system up here were to stick around just a little bit longer, that actually may help this system here dig a little bit deeper, which can lead to a more easterly track here, which, as we looked at the precip type map for the GFS, it's a little bit slower. If we were to compare it to the European model at around the same time frame, okay, it's a little bit faster with our main system, but also with this other piece of energy to the northwest, it's also a little bit faster, which kind of makes this system here move in a little bit quicker. But it also doesn't have to dig nearly as deep to the south here, because this system up here is also moving a little bit quicker. So you kind of get what I'm saying here. Really, the longer the system here sits up here, is the more this system here digs to the south, which can lead to a more easterly track here. So if anybody that's hoping for an easterly track here, it's still not off the table just yet. Even though most of the balls kind of keep it track 7 like this, I think it's still possible we could see a little bit of an easterly track, just a little bit, maybe towards the Appalachian Mountains. But don't get your hopes too high. Checking out the Canadian model, it's actually pretty similar to the European model. It's a little bit more progressive with it. The only differences between these models is that the GFS is slower, which will make the system dig to the south. Meanwhile, the European model and the Canadian are moving a little bit faster, which doesn't have to make the system here dig nearly as far south, and also don't have to amplify, at least not nearly as much. But let's kind of continue here. So if we're going to move on to 18Z on Thursday, okay, our system here is more neutrally tilt by that point over the plains. If we're checking the European model at around the same time frame, if we could get there we go. You can see here already the European model is still a little bit faster, but it also kind of becomes slightly more negatively tilted. Actually, the lines here suggest this is more neutrally tilted, but still, it's a little bit faster. Comparing that to the Canadian model, it's pretty similar to it. Okay, let's kind of continue on. Let's move on to about 24 hours later. 18Z on Friday. I mean, look all that energy over Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, even for parts of Deep South. There's a lot of energy within that system. It's pretty ridiculous. And if we were to check out the European model at the same time frame, you can see here from the European model, it's faster than the GFS. Keeps kind of the main piece of energy or the main part of the system more towards up in Ohio. And if you were to look into the Canadian model at around the same time, it's actually a little bit similar too. But also keep in mind that it's kind of a tad bit weaker, at least from the surface load base anyway. But kind of like about vorticity here, it seems like the Canadian model might be just a tad bit stronger with the energy as well. So that kind of makes it a little bit more interesting. And if you move on to 12Z on Saturday, that's when the system here really begins to move off to the northeast. That's the Canadian. Here's the European model. It seems like the European model kind of sticks around a little bit longer, especially with a stronger low pressure system. That can make the system stick around just a little bit longer. And then here's the GFS model. You can see here, kind of similar to the European model, just a little bit. So really, kind of to review this a little bit overall, early on, we have to watch how this piece of energy goes here across parts of southern Canada, kind of along the border of the United States, because that could determine how deep this system here could dig. And if this system here were to move out a little bit earlier, this system out here wouldn't have to dig near as much further to the south. So that'd be something to note, and that definitely be something we'll watch closely. And until we get better observations on it, which probably be as early as Wednesday night into Thursday morning. Hopefully by that point we get a much better idea of with the system. And maybe we could put some numbers on that as well when it comes to snow. At the moment, it's still too early to push out snowfall to us because really, we don't have the tracking system locked in yet. It'll likely be another day or so before we really know about it. Okay, something that all the models agree on. I didn't mean to do that. There we go. But something all the models really agree on is there's going to be a lot of wind with this system. Back on the precip type map, the isobars are very close together, which indicates that there's going to be some strong winds at the surface. So this is by 18Z on Thursday. Here's your Arctic front. We'll make this blue line here. So this is your Arctic front right here. Behind the Arctic front, very cold temperatures, and also some pretty strong winds as well, which can make things feel colder than that. And then check this out by Friday morning. Our Arctic front is through central Kentucky, and it's down into the Gulf of Mexico. And I mean, just check out how far this Arctic front goes. I mean, it goes through for a good chunk of the Gulf of Mexico. And this is Friday morning. This is where your Arctic front is kind of placed at. And our main part of the system is up here. You can tell here the south side of the system, we got wind gusts that this ball is spinning out that could be up to 40 to 50 miles per hour. To be considered a blizzard, you will need sustained winds of 35 miles per hour or frequent wind gusts of 35 miles per hour. That could be classified as a blizzard. That also kind of comes along with heavy snowfall that could lead to reduced visibility. So we got winds will more likely be strong enough to create blizzard-like conditions. So I got pretty decent confidence that this system here is going to be a blizzard. And when we look to these other models here, they're going to show something pretty similar. But check this out, how the system here just continues to rapidly deepen. As that system continues to rapidly deepen, those winds on the south and west side get stronger. That's where those millibars just keep on getting tighter. At the same time, in the warm sector, we got strong winds out of the south here hitting along the coastline, especially up towards the New England states, where we got wind gusts that's pushing about almost to 60 miles per hour. And then you go to the higher elevations of Vermont, New Hampshire, where winds are stronger than that. So that's definitely going to cause a lot of problems in the New England states, which can lead to power outages. Meanwhile, back to the winter side of the system, we got very strong wind gusts that the European model is suggesting, which I do believe some of these wind gusts are a little bit overdone. But even take it off just a little bit, these wind gusts could certainly create a lot of blowing snow, can create large snow drifts as well. But even with wind gusts like this could also cause power outages. But given by how cold these temperatures are, if you get a power outage during a blizzard, I mean, you're kind of stuck by that point. More than likely, it's going to take a long period of time before your power can get restored. So that's why it's very important to get prepared for stuff like this. I mean, because that possibility is certainly there, especially on the backside system where blizzard conditions will be likely. I mean, even checking out wind gusts over at Lake Michigan, I mean, this model's spitting out up to 70-mile-an-hour wind gusts, which is pretty ridiculous. Let's check out the Canadian model. So this is the same time, 18Z on Thursday. You can see here, here's your Arctic front right here. Got strong winds across Oklahoma. Wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour that this model is spinning out. And the winds on this run here in particular is a little bit weaker, at least compared to other model guidance. But even being a little bit weaker with those wind gusts, there's still some spots where wind gusts are pretty strong. I mean, it's got over at Ohio with wind gusts that's greater than 60 miles an hour in some places. And that by itself could cause major problems out there. And we even got 40 plus about our wind gusts for a good chunk of the Midwest, going as far south as Kentucky, and even in the warm sector system up towards the New England states. We got strong wind gusts up there as well. And then looking at the GFS, okay, pretty similar to the other models. But also then again, GFS is a little bit slower with this one. So it makes the system amplify a little bit earlier and it kind of slows it down just a little bit. But check out the pack side of the system here. Eastern Illinois, wind gusts 60 to 65 miles per hour. That's pretty brutal on the pack side of that system. But look at this. As we kind of get into Friday evening, you got the potential for blizzard-like conditions as far south as parts of Kentucky. Which down here in Kentucky, we haven't seen a blizzard in a long time down here in Kentucky. We are overdue for one. This is probably our greatest chance for a blizzard that we had in many years, but there's also still that possibility that a blizzard may not even happen here. That's something to keep note of as well. And then you got wind gusts up across Lake Michigan up to 60 miles per hour. And then again, in the warm sector, parts of the Northeast, you got strong wind gusts. So basically, all these models agree on widespread wind gusts that could be 40 to 50 miles per hour, with isolated areas getting or exceeding 50 or maybe even 55 miles per hour. So that's definitely going to cause some serious problems there with wind gusts like that, which I don't think this here is not getting mentioned that much, and it really should be, because with winds like this, you're going to get power outage issues, and if you're going to get power outage during the middle of a blizzard, you could certainly be in trouble. So it's always important to be prepared for winds like this, especially with very cold temperatures out there. Make sure you have a reliable heat source, even during a power outage as well, or have an evacuation plan. Any of those could be great. Alright, last thing we're going to check out before we end this video is the wind chill. We're going to be talking about life-threatening wind chills, and I think that's be kind of like a understatement. Look at these wind chills the European ball is spinning out. I mean, 50 to 60 below zero Thursday morning across parts of Wyoming, the Dakotas, Nebraska, back into parts of Montana. I mean, that is some serious cold. But we got wind chills below zero as far south as the panhandle of Texas and the majority of Oklahoma. And you can see here that Arctic front just continues to move south across Texas throughout the day on Thursday, which will eventually surpass the Gulf Coast, which by this point here, by Thursday night, you got wind chills that could be near the single digits along the coastline, which is pretty insane. But also, check out this cold front here. Lexington, Kentucky, a wind chill of 39 degrees. That ain't bad at all. If you go over to Louisville, wind chill almost 4 degrees below zero. That's one heck of a change behind this front here. But even checking out areas where they could experience blizzard-like conditions on the south side of the system, I mean, these are some ridiculous wind chills. I mean, 30 degrees below zero. I think that is a little bit overdone with those wind chills, but even being overdone just a little bit, wind chills can still be very dangerous out there. I mean, more than likely, we're going to see wind chills 10 to 20 degrees below zero. And depending on how much snow you can see, can make wind chills even colder. Typically, when you have snowpack, that typically makes the temperatures much colder. And check this out by Christmas Eve morning. Check out these wind chills. I mean, you got wind chills in the Florida Panhandle in the single digits, and also got wind chills below zero as far south as central Alabama and Georgia. That's pretty insane to really think about. But we also still got some pretty insane wind chills across the Dakotas. That's where some of the worst wind chills will likely be at. That'll be across the northern plains and even for parts of the high plains as well. And here you go, going into Christmas morning here. The wind chills are not nearly as bad, but still very cold out there. I mean, 10 to 20 degrees below zero across the Ohio Valley, the interior Northeast, back into parts of the Midwest and the plains as well. Alright, the final part of this video here, this is my scenario map. Now, I made one of these a few days ago. I posted on Twitter, and a lot of people generally agree with it. But as expected, we had changes. And this is my newly updated scenario map. I already kind of want to make some tweaks already. I've made it this morning. Kind of want to make some little tweaks to scenario 2 to make it a little bit more realistic, which I'll probably mention that here in a little bit. But this is, so we got two scenarios. Scenario number 1, our low amplifies a little bit earlier. It's also a little bit stronger. It takes the track across parts of Illinois, Indiana, up into Michigan, which brings the worsening impacts that will be shaded in blue. That, or in other words, your winter storm track, which includes decent chunk of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, all of Michigan, and even including parts of Wisconsin. So you can see some significant impacts within a blue shade. And the chances of scenario 1 happening, it's a pretty good chance. It's a 70%. A good chunk of the models agree on scenario 1. However, there's also a chance that scenario 2 could try to show up, which if scenario 2 were to verify here, maybe kind of similar to the GFS, it's a little bit slower so that cold air will be able to kind of push in, or the system's a little bit more suppressed and it keeps it on a more eastward track, or like we talked about with the vorticity up here, with the system up here stick around a little bit longer, that can make the system, dig a little bit farther to the south, which can make the system have a little bit more of an eastward track. But even for that scenario, I've given it a low 30% chance, but the chance is still there that could occur. Or maybe if it could go in between these scenarios. Who knows? But this is not necessarily the final product here, but this is kind of gives you a little bit idea of what we have going on out here, at least in the weather forecasted world. So yes, and some changes are likely going to be made as well. So definitely stay tuned for more updates over the next couple more days. But anyways, guys, this is all for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like this video, hit the like button. If you like my channel, hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell notification so you never miss an upload. If you guys have questions about this, put a comment section down below. I'll answer you guys questions. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.